Betty, thank you so much for joining me today on Life Repurposed.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we're going to be talking about your story in the Life Repurposed book. One of the things you talk about is a road trip. So I want to know, as we get rolling today, where is your favorite place to go on a family road trip?
We camp. We're campers.
Oh.
I'm actually at the campground right now, and that's where we were headed on my road trip that time, was camping. We love to camp. We've upgraded our camping a little bit from tent to RV, but we're still campers.
So we started out as tent campers when our kids were little, or it was more of a pop-up tent, like a really old-fashioned archaic pop-up tent thing. Then we had a little pull-behind trailer. We never got as far as RV. Our kids grew up before we could do that.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. So it has been for just a ton of memories and a ton of laughs and a ton of, just fun experiences with them. So
Yeah.
that's what we like to do in our spare time.
We made a lot of memories too. I do remember, though, how tent camping was so much more work because you have to pack up so much stuff. And it's not like you have an RV to keep it in.
Exactly, which led to my problem on that particular day, is trying to get all my stuff in there. So I totally get it.
Yeah, so we won't give away the entire story, but I do want to talk about it a little bit because it's such a significant part of your journey in your own personal development. So it sounded like you had a minivan full and also one of those tow behind hitch type things piled up with stuff.
Yes, and the luggage rack on top of
Oh,
the
and the luggage
minivan was
racks and
piled
stuff.
with stuff. It was horrific. So, I think most people probably don't camp like that, but I'm just like OCD about having every single thing I need. And in my defense, we had just gotten these 3 kids. We were still fostering them. They weren't adopted yet. We ended up adopting them, but it was our first vacation that we were taking them on. And you just want it to be perfect and have
Yeah.
everything you need. And so we were loaded down.
Yeah, and then when you're camping, you have to also bring bedding. So you literally have to bring everything and the kitchen sink.
Hmm. And that's exactly what I titled the picture, everything but the kitchen sink. And I don't know about you, but when you camped, my husband is just an overachiever. So we have our big 3-bedroom tent for, everybody can, have their space. And then we have a separate, just open, 1-room tent where we can eat and put the kids' toys and, store our stuff. And then we even had a shower tent.
Wow.
So you could, yeah. So, I mean, it was really over the top.
Oh, we did that too. We took the screen house with us, and then, yeah. And then you have to have some games and stuff to do.
Toys, and I had to have a high chair because I had a little one, and just all kinds of.
Yeah. So I can't remember exactly the circumstances of how you ended up stopped alongside the highway, but I think it was that somebody was pointing at your car.
Yeah, well, they were actually honking at us and pointing, and it's like, okay, there's either something wrong here, or they just want to murder us on the side of the highway. We need to pull over and let it happen. So my husband said, I think there's a problem. I'm going to pull over and check. So that's how we even knew. We were just coasting along quite nicely. I was snoozing quite nicely.
So in your case, I'm thinking a flat tire actually would have been more pleasant than what you experienced.
Yes, I would have much preferred the flat tire, but in hindsight, it would have been a lot less funny later on.
Right.
So
yeah. So for our listeners, tell us why the people were honking at you.
Well, my husband had tied just everything to everything on the back, little hitch trailer, on the roof, everywhere. And apparently some of the rope wasn't as good as he thought it was. And so we were dragging our luggage down the highway. And that was interesting. It was an interesting experience. And anyone who's listening who doesn't know this, if you drag your luggage down the highway, wherever it's dragging, it will shred all the clothes right inside of there. So
and leave them sprinkled on the highway.
Well, that's pulling over and noticing that and realizing, okay, I'm picking all these suitcases up, but I'm not picking up the one that has, me and my husband's clothes in it. Where is it? Oh no. And so that's where the real adventure came, was locating our luggage and where we found it and how we got it, our clothes back was just too funny.
Yeah, I
So
was chuckling because, anybody who's ever had a piece of paper fly out of their car and they're trying to chase it down the road because you described that with your undergarments, and
yep.
so I'll let the readers discover that, but I was laughing because I could just picture what that would be like to be chasing panties around the highway.
Oh, yeah, with people honking at you and swerving around you. It was just I had one, person has already messaged me, that has read the book. I'm not sure if it was someone who was also a collaborator in the book or not, but, um, I'm not a laugh out loud person, but that just made me bust up, I'm like, "Good, I'm glad you got a laugh out of that." We laugh about it now too, but in the moment, it just wasn't it just so was not funny,
Right.
and it just triggered me, and it was a real eye opener as
Mhm.
to, what triggers us and how we react in moments of when things don't go our way. I just was so upset over the fact that things weren't going the way I had planned them because, things are supposed to go just like we planned them, right? And, here's all this luggage being towed behind that now I have to fit inside the car with my poor kids and all that they have in there. They could barely breathe as it was, and then realizing I don't even have my luggage. And then finding my luggage and finding it in the situation it's in, I was just so angry that I don't even remember, like, thinking to blame anyone. I was just so angry at the situation. And my daughter, my oldest daughter that was with us, the youngest of my biological, but the oldest one that was with us, she just remembers it in such a way because she says, "Mom, you were just stomping across that highway like a crazy person," and I was just so angry. And then, cars honking at you and swerving around you, that just makes you angrier because can't you see that my clothes are, don't you understand what we're going through over here? So I just was just full of anger, really with not any blame
Mhm.
because I hadn't even taken the time to think that far into it. I was just reacting in anger that things were disrupting my plan,
Mhm.
is pretty much what it was.
Yeah, so that's super insightful because sometimes we do react to circumstances and I do jump sometimes to blaming a person even though I know that isn't the case. It's just they're the closest person to me. So after you played this game of Frogger, getting all of your
Yes.
stuff back, how did you make it better? Like how did you move forward in your vacation?
You know, we all have, at least I pray that everyone has, it's my prayer for everyone to have those moments where God just literally is on your shoulder speaking to you. I've had a few of those moments in my life where it is as if he is right next to me speaking in my ear and I clearly hear his voice. And when I threw those clothes in the car and slammed, my van had one of those sliding doors that if you just touch it a little bit, it'll continue to close on its own kind of thing. But oh no, at that particular moment, I was slamming that little thing shut, you know? And then just as I put my hand on the door handle and opened the door, I glanced back at my kids in the back and then I kind of glanced over at my husband and it all happened. It seemed like just in an instant. And I just saw their faces, like, "Oh, no." You could just tell they were just, like, dreading whatever was coming next for me. And in that instant, God said to me just as clearly as if He were standing there on the side of the road with me, "The way you react in this moment is gonna, make or break your vacation.
Mhm.
So, you know, choose your response wisely." And I just looked at all of them and what they expected me to do was continue yelling for the next 8 hours and probably the whole 2 weeks. But I just busted up laughing, and when I did, it's like the air just deflated from the car.
Yes.
You know, and oh my goodness, we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. 8 hours of laughing. Now, did we have to do some shopping when we got there?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then that night, my daughter came out, and in one of her bags, she had a shirt, and the way it had been folded, it had kinda gotten messed up in the drag, and it looked like a bullet had shot right in her shirt, and so we got another laugh, just what it was doing to the clothing, but we had a laugh-filled trip when typically with me, that would have been one of the most miserable car rides that
Mhm,
my family could have ever undergone. So, and we look back at that with laughter all the time, and so
mhm.
does so many people in our community because I posted on Facebook. I actually spoke about it at a women's conference once and shared. And the funny part that I don't tell in the book is that I did hurl that suitcase over to the side, and I want you to know that for about 3 years after that, we would drive down that highway on our way to LA or, wherever. There's my suitcase on the side, just getting more decrepit, more sun damaged, more, and it became a real, like, hunt. People would drive down that highway, "Oh, I saw your suitcase," it just became this thing. But, every so often, I would have my husband stop and I'd get out and take a picture with it or something. And it kind of is like, that's our baggage, right? And how many
Right.
times do we keep going back to our baggage
Yeah.
in our life? And so finally, I picked it up one day on the side of the highway and I put it in my car. I had a women's conference I was going to speak at. So I told this whole story about what happened to me and I shared some scriptures and, talked about what God had taught me.
Mhm.
And then I pulled out that old decrepit bag and my underwear are still attached to the, I'm not kidding you. And I just had the best time showing that, and everybody just roared. And in place of that, I revealed this cross that
Mm,
my husband had built, and it says focus forward on it. Because I told him, we don't need to keep going back to our baggage, those things
yeah.
that we've grown up learning or whatever. Let's focus forward and try to change those things that set us off. And as my husband took that cross out and planted it on the side of the highway where the suitcase used to be.
Mhm.
And so for many years, it was there, and truck drivers would take pictures of it and send it to me, and it was just so fun. But about 2 months ago, there was a sign on it when we went by, and the Caltrans or whatever was removing it. So this past week when I went by, it's gone.
Mm,
But it just became something so much bigger than that trip to me.
yeah.
But it's all about listening when God speaks to you and not being so caught up in your anger that you can't admit that the things I do and the way I respond are not appropriate and I need to make a
Mhm.
change. So that's kind of what I learned from that experience.
That is so good because there are so many
Thank you.
times where we have those moments, and it's like it's I don't know what it is, the instinct or the impulsiveness, I guess, is what it is that kicks in. And so I can totally relate when you talk about anger because there are so many moments that I'd love to go back and undo. It would have made something more fun. It would have saved a relationship. I look at so many things like that. I'm looking at where you're sitting as we're doing the interview, and it reminds me of the conversation we started off air about how you're moving and the house you're moving into isn't ready. And so you have a car full of boxes. I can see a couple in the background.
Hmm.
How did you react to this situation when you found out that you did not have your house ready in time and you're essentially homeless right now?
Yeah, and this has been a real test of my patience because we're having this home built in another state, and we put ours for sale, but it's sold in 6 days. So it's like, oh goodness. So every time I talk to the builders, they push our date out a little further. And so I was getting really upset about it because, it's not going according to my plan. And I think that's so often why we get upset
Mhm.
because we are planners and check off the box people. And when it doesn't work that way, uh, you know,
Right.
so I have finally, I did have a couple of times when I just really got upset about it, but I have finally just gotten this peace about it that, you know what? It'll be ready when it's ready. God knows what he's doing. He doesn't need me to be in charge. And in the meantime, we have this beautiful RV and this beautiful campground that we can stay in, and life is good.
You have a wonderful website, Momsense Incorporated or momsenseinc.org,
Yes.
and you have some books. So tell us about your writing a little bit and about the ministry you have.
Okay. I have written 2 devotionals. Pondering Virtue was my first one, and Whispered Grace is my second. And they're just little, like, daily devotionals. Most of them are, they come from experiences in my life. And, I've added some scripture and some questions at the end, just, for like, if you wanted to do one a day or
Mhm.
however you wanted to do it. But I just have to that's how I process things. I write them out. So that's how they came to be. Mom Sense is a ministry that I founded several years ago. We started out as just a social media ministry, offering devotions, offering just encouragement, support, prayer, those kind of things. And then we started adding some events to that, some, physical events that people could come to, conferences, things like that. And now we have a full on center where we
Mm.
offer small group facilitation for like parenting, addiction recovery, anger management, grief, depression, domestic violence support groups, things like that.
So it's like the news headline would read from Betty's baggage to Mom Sense Ministry.
Yes, pretty much. Thank you. That's great. But yeah, it's just taking your life experiences. They don't mean anything if we don't share them.
Mhm.
If we don't um offer that to someone else so that they can be encouraged, and then they can then encourage someone else, and it's really
Mhm.
just like a ripple in a pond. We have that power to make that impact on women in our community and in our world just by, you know sharing what God has done in our lives. So